Hello, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Aska Kamil from Kamla Nehru College, University of Delhi. Today I am going to discuss module Central Place Theory by Christaller and Losch, which comes under the paper Urban Geography. First of all, let's discuss what could be the learning outcomes of this module. While going through this module, you will be able to comprehend elements of location theory, central place theory by Christaller and Losch, as well understand how settlements locate in relation to one another, the amount of market area a central place can control, and why some central places function as hamlets, villages and towns as well as cities. So we begin. We may have observed that despite having the same population number, one town might surpass another in its functional importance. On this very perspective, two theories have been advocated. The Central Place Theory, CPT, by Walter Christaller and its modified version by August Losch. These theories hint towards the relationship between the functions of settlements and its spatial locations within an urban system. Walter Christaller, a German geographer, proposed his theory of central places in his book Central Place in Southern Germany in the year 1933. He divided his book into three parts. The theoretical part concerned with the setting up of the theory. The connecting part, which mostly considered practical methods whereby the theory could be tested in the real world. And the third as a regional part, where the southern Germany was examined. The methods that were formulated in the second part were applied to substantiate the theory. Of the three parts, practical methods and regional applications had limited value. It is the theoretical part which is of greater attention. The introduction to theoretical part of Christaller's book is entitled, "Are there laws which determine the number, distribution and size of towns?" He attempted to develop a deductive theory which reveals the ordering principle in the distribution of towns. It attempts to explain the number, location, size, spacing and functions of settlement within an urban system. Christaller based his theory on certain assumptions, like there is an isotropic plane, or let's say a flat surface on which natural resources are evenly distributed. Population is also distributed on a plane. All consumers have similar purchasing power, same taste or demand for the goods and services. There is no excess profit, that is, there exists a perfect competition. There is a single means of transport and transport cost rises proportionately with distance. Consumer visit the nearest central place as this minimizes the distance traveled. The entrepreneurs are economic men with the aim on profit maximization. As people will prefer to visit the nearest center, suppliers will locate themselves as far away as from each other possible to maximize their market areas. The central place hierarchy acts as a closed system. So, towns act as the central places for the countryside. Christaller accepts that this basic assumption is derived from the work of Gradman, who contended that the distinctive role of the town was to be the center of its rural surroundings and a facilitator of local commerce with neighboring areas, collecting and exporting the local products, importing and distributing the necessary goods and services which the countryside demands. Though the population of town may be important by virtue of its size, but it cannot measure of the centrality. Therefore, four principles underlie central place theory: centrality, complementary areas, threshold and range of goods and services. The centrality of a place refers to the extent to which a town serves its surrounding area and can only be measured in terms of goods and services offered. There are different orders of goods and services. For some are costly and rarely purchased, say a car, and will need a larger population to sustain them, while others are everyday need items and will require small population for its survival. For example, bread. The variety and quantity of goods and services it provides for its population and neighbors underline its functional importance. Another term for us is complementary area. An area which is central place is the focal point This area would be larger for the bigger and more important central places and smaller for the less important ones. Another principle is threshold population. This is the minimum number of people required to support any goods and services outlet established at the central place as shown in the figure 1. One can say that it as the minimum population which is required for the sale of goods or to sustain any services. Some goods and services need large population and other a small population to achieve their threshold values. In an ideal case of the uniform income, consumption and taste, it can be stated in the terms of population numbers. For example, a minimum varying population is needed to retain a doctor, bank or a post office. Also, a grocery shop needs a relatively small local population to keep up its business, while jewelry or a car, which is occasionally purchased, needs a larger threshold population. The fourth principle is range of goods. This is the maximum distance that a consumer is willing to travel to obtain certain goods or services, as is shown in the figure 2. At some range from the center, the inconvenience of travel measured in time, cost and trouble will outweigh the value or the need for the good. Like a distance travel to buy a bread will be very small and hence frequent trips may be afforded, as against a journey to buy a coat or a car or a jewelry. The maximum range of goods and service is the farthest distance calculated in terms of time and money that a consumer could afford. So a consumer who has to travel all the way to the central places to buy a good will have lesser money available with him than the one living at the close proximity of the central place, because the former has incurred transport cost and so will be able to purchase less. After a certain distance, people cannot afford to buy goods at all because the transport cost exhausts them of money. Let us say for everyday grocery items that are of low cost and frequently needed, like bread or milk or newspaper, people would not prefer to spend much time, travel and money to obtain it. Therefore, it has a small range. As against for goods which cost more and are less frequently required, people are prepared to travel longer distance. Nonetheless, one cannot ignore the reality that most journeys fulfill purposes. One can buy the bread and the coat on the same trip, but have been excluded from the theoretical consideration. If the population is evenly distributed, the market areas determined by the minimum range will remain as small as possible, and maximum number of firms will find space in the area served by the system. The market area becomes circular because the transport cost increases proportionately with distance from the center, as you may see in the figure. Goods with low thresholds and small market areas are low order goods and will occupy low order centers. Goods with high threshold, termed as high order goods, and will occupy high order centers. In between the high order and the low order centers are the intermediate order centers, selling middle order goods. This denotes that the central places are graded according to the level of goods and services that they offer. Therefore, a high order center will cater services of high and middle and low order. Middle order center may provide functions to the middle order and low order, while low order center delivers the functions of only low order. The entrepreneur, with an aim of profit maximization, positions themselves as far away from the competitors as possible, giving the market a circular shape to ensure that at least one threshold value is covered under their market area. As all the entrepreneurs act in this way, they become evenly spaced over the plane in a triangular lattice pattern. So they are equidistant from their 6 nearest competitors, as in the figure 4 and 5. In case of single entrepreneur, the maximum market area is circular. If there are many competitors, each with a singular market area as well as located at an equal distance from his 6 nearest neighbors, some areas will remain unserved by the entrepreneurs. In order to serve the unserved customers, suppliers or entrepreneurs need to come closer together, eventually making the circular areas to overlap. Since the customers in this overlap zone will visit the nearest areas, it will be the hexagonal as in the figure 6. higher order centers have bigger hexagonal market areas and low order centers have smaller hexagons. This results in a lattice of hexagonal market areas where hierarchy of central place is functionally and spatially organized. It is possible to isolate the two limits in relation to each goods and services as lower and upper limits. The lower limits is noted by the minimum demand for a commodity or service, that is thresholds. Upper limit is that beyond which a good will no longer be obtained from the center, that is the range. In an isotropic surface of equal population density and with uniformity of income in a model of a town distribution, a settlement is given a rank B. This B serves as the surrounding area in such a way that its one of the good number 51 shows the upper limit or the range of 51 kilometers. And if the lower limit of the threshold is such that it can only be offered at B, then it will be supplied over an area of 51 kilometer radius about B. If the next good numbered 50 has a range of 20 kilometers, then there will emerge a ring 1 kilometer wide unserved from B with that good. If the most closely packed equidistant distribution of settlement points as suggested by Christaller is adopted, then there will be a fix of these on a ring about B. Christaller gives the distance between the centers as 36 kilometers. For still lower order goods, the next location will be those at the centers of equilateral triangles joining the B centers. At these points, K centers will emerge. Now the goods number 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12 with ranges 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, 13 and 12 kilometers can be offered effectively at B and K centers respectively. But the goods number 11 cannot. For once more, the unserved 1 kilometer ring will emerge. And so further series of lower order services centers has to be introduced. In this way, a whole hierarchy of central places emerge, with towns of equal rank equidistant from each other. The area which a town serves is termed by Christaller as a complementary region. And under the above condition, these are circular in shape, regions. In an attempt to avoid overlap and to match the densest distribution of settlement points, the circular regions were converted into hexagons. Now, if there are further goods for which the threshold population required is greater than that provided by the B system, then one place alone from the system may be sufficient and will acquire higher value as a central place and will be given the designation of D center with a range of 36 kilometers. Also, newer and higher centers will have the ranges of 62 kilometers and 108 kilometers respectively as the range and threshold population is increased. Note that each settlement serves its own hinterland in addition to a distinctive range of goods related to the increased size of hierarchy. That is, an area of population equivalent to the hinterlands of two other settlements in addition, hence called rule of 3 or expressed through the constant K. Christaller devised a relationship between every two connective levels in the hierarchy symbolizes D by a K value of K constant, which denotes a discrete number of lower order centers and market areas, which every higher order center dominates, in addition to its own. K is equal to 3 marketing principle. Under the marketing principle, an urban settlement reveals consumer demand. Each consumer would try to be as close as possible to every level of hierarchy so as to minimize the amount of traveling for the consumer. Thus, a settlement of every order would be surrounded by 6 other settlements of the next order. The low order centers position themselves on the boundaries of market areas of middle order centers. People at lower order center will have a choice between 3 higher order centers, since all the 3 are equidistant. Each higher order center then receives 1/3 of the customer of the 6 immediately lower order centers which are located on the boundary of its market area. It serves a population equivalent to 2 lower order centers, that is 6 into 1 by 3, besides itself, its own population. Therefore, overall, it serves a total of 3 central places, that is 6 into 1 by 3 is equal to 2 plus 1 of itself makes it 3. For each one of the largest settlements, there would be 3 of the second grades, 9 of the third grades, 27 of the fourth grade, and so on. Thus, there is only one center of the highest order, and the number of the centers at every level below it increases by a factor of 3, as given in the figure 7. K is equal to 4 transport principle. The transport principle states that the distribution of the central places is most favorable when as many places of concern or importance lie on one traffic route between two important towns, the route being established as a straight and as cheap as possible. The other unimportant places may not be taken into cognizance. The central places would thus be lined up on the straight traffic routes which radiate out from the central point. Central places are so located that the lower order centers lie along the straight line paths between the higher order centers. In the transport principle, a lower order center is equidistant from the two lower order centers, that is 6 into 1 by 2 plus its own 1, making a total of 4 as shown in the figure 8. When central places are arranged according to the transport principle, the lower order centers are located at the midpoint of each side of the hexagon, rather than at the corners. Thus, the transport principle produces a hierarchy organized in a K is equal to 4 arrangement in which a central place are nested according to the rule of 4. This is termed as K is equal to 4 network principle. The number of settlements serving as a central place at each decreases. In hierarchy would be 1, 4, 16, 64, 256 and so on. K is equal to 7 administrative principle. The market areas of each of the higher order centers include the highest market areas of each of the 6 neighboring lower order centers as shown in figures 9 and 10. This is because law and administration in theory do not experience exponential decay with distance, but remain fully enforced up to the boundaries of the administrative units in which they are applied. This is the most efficient if each higher order place clearly controls the territories of those places beneath it in the system. For the administrative principle, the numerical progression then would be as 1, 7, 49, 343 and so on. There are certain points raised against CPT, like the central place theory has been criticized for its oversimplification of the real world by constructing a number of assumptions. Large areas of flat land are rare. The positioning of the settlements is generally random and not evenly spaced, contrary to even spacing of the settlements suggested by Christaller. The hexagonal pattern is suited for theoretical development, but in the real world, many other complicated factors are at work. The concept of the perfect competition is untrue in reality, with some firms making more money than the others. Point has been raised on the hierarchy of central places. Central places are grouped into order 2nd, 3rd and 4th, but these do not match with the theoretical expectations as there is a definite and clear ranking of center within each other. Equal size spheres of influence. As per the theory, it is expected that 2 third order centers will have equal size spheres of influence. Central places theory suggests that each center's sphere of influence for its activities at any specific level will be equal in size to every other center's sphere of influence. But in reality, this has rarely been the case. Every higher order center also functions as a lower order center in the CPT, but often it is seen that lower centers have some activities which some higher centers have in central place theory. Consumer travel behavior cannot be projected. Affluence, change in taste, preferences, and greater mobility enables people to travel far, to do their shopping and obtain required services, have altered demand patterns for goods and services. Technological change has also brought about changes in the ways provision of goods and services are organized and located. Examples: supermarkets, malls, mall culture, online shopping, etc. The government's intervention, like setting up of economic or residential based planning and policy making with emphasis on decentralization and legislation on the environment, housing laws affect future growth of various settlements outside the town. Christaller envisaged each center with a particular function, whereas they mostly have many functions, which also changes over the period of time. It may be said that the central places theory may not have an universal validity. It also cannot be pushed for explaining settlement pattern in any region. The purpose of the central place theory is to identify a few salient features found in the certain types of settlements. Settlement pattern and tools available when seeking to describe and understand a particular pattern found in the real world. So what has been the applicability and use of CPT? It provides a rationale for selective location and efficient space and functions. In terms of functional and behavioral dimensions, it has drawn attention to country and intertown interdependence. It encourages order in spacing and interrelatedness of settlements. The central place theory seeks to analyze the functional and hierarchical orderliness in settlement landscape. Settlements vary in size, function and number, but the centralistic function is sought in the location economies, social and administrative structure and their visible and not so visible forms, and is evident in location of the structures like church, community hall or university. The central place theory helps us to identify more clearly the role of settlements as places of trade exchange and the extent to which this has influenced the nature of emerging settlement pattern in the region. The central place theory has been used as a guideline for the relocation policy, and this was incorporated as an integral part of regional planning in Germany. In Northeast polders, location of settlements, population size, linkages, hierarchy and allocation of market and service functions were determined by the central place principle. Now another important question arises of its applicability in India. CPT is a normative in character and so has limited empirical applicability. No real-world settlement system can be expected to conform to all the proportions of the central place for sure. India's hierarchical system is represented from the point of view of administration and demography. India has 6 levels of hierarchies of settlements at administrative level. At the top of the hierarchy is the national capital, followed by state capital, district headquarters, tehsil towns, block development centers and gram panchayat centers. The administrative hierarchy of settlement in India differs considerably from the central place system under the administrative principle as pointed by the Christaller. Theoretically, there is a ratio of 1:7 between the number of settlements of higher and lower orders. In India, ratio of districts to state is almost 1:19, where gram panchayats per community development block may reach up to 40 in number. Also, the number of tehsils per district is over 6, and this corresponds to administrative principle quite closely. Again, from the theoretical point, the spacing between the settlements of lower and higher order should increase by the ratio of 2:6 in the most cases. In India, this ratio is much greater. Here again, the spacing of the tehsil and district level centers conforms to the theory. However, an administrative hierarchy of places does exist, though the number and the spacing of the different hierarchical levels of places is far from ideal. Another perspective to the study is census of population, where system of hierarchy of places is commonly recognized. These range from million cities to revenue villages having less than 500 populations, which in India are recognized as hamlets. The population size of settlement bears some relation, even if roughly, to the centrality of the place. The settlement in India shows a close similarity to the theoretical central place system, based on the marketing principle. In the system, the ratio of the spacing of higher order centers to the immediate lower centers is 1:1.72. The actual ratio of spacing varies from 1.41 to 1.83, except with the 2 exceptions of villages and medium towns. The major exceptions relate to the million cities, which are in fact primate cities. Therefore, it may not be correct to convincingly state that the central place systems apply to the Indian conditions in totality. Also, on the other hand, it cannot be rejected completely as well. Another interesting theory on the location is given by August Losch. In 1940, famous economist August Losch published a book entitled Economics of Location, in which he established a general theory of location. Losch sought to draw attention to the marketing factor and the idea of maximum profits related to the sales. He claimed that it's not a single economic pull that influences most settlements, rather a complex combination of market, communication and administration. He attempted to explain the size and shape of the market areas within which a location would command the largest revenue. He based his theory on the set of assumptions like an isotropic surface, constant supply of goods and services, population is evenly distributed, demand decreases with an increase in price. If the price increase is the result of an increase in the transport cost, demand would decrease with the distance from the production center. The demand curve would be cone-shaped and the market areas will be circular. Entrepreneurs act as an economic man, the main aim being profit maximization. He oversimplified the world to a flat uniform plane, held supply constant and assumed that with increase in the price, the demand for the product decreased. And if this price increase was because of an increase in the transport cost, the demand would decrease with distance from the production center as shown in the figure 11. He pointed that there are many producers located on the plane, each producer located on the plane being equidistant from the other in such a way that their market areas are circular. The size of the market areas is dependent on the number of entrepreneurs. As producers or entrepreneurs increase in number, their market area becomes smaller and smaller, and the profits are competed away. Also, the producers move further close as circular areas leave some places unserved between circles and eventually takes the shape of a hexagon as shown in figure 12. Each product will represent a different sized market area, and so the size of the hexagons will also vary. Losch attempted to find a spatial structure that would be fit for both the producer and the consumer. To identify it, he chose one production center from the entire set of production points established on the planes. He then arranged the hexagons in such a fashion so that this one center was common for all. He then rotated the hexagons around the central place and brought them to the rest, where the maximum number of hexagons coincided, forming points of maximum demand, which should ideally develop for concentration of industry. Thus, like Christaller, hexagonal patterns, though smaller in size, 12 sectors developed. Of the 12, 6 sectors emerged in which many settlements existed and numerous services were offered, and other 6 sectors where the settlements and services were scanty. The hexagonal structure is dependent on the number of the units required to institute the production of a commodity. This number will fluctuate considerably from the commodity to commodity. Losch, unlike Christaller, allows for this fact and adapts it into his structure. He opines that given the closest packed distribution of farms or units and the hexagonal market areas, the smallest number of farms which may be served will be 3 in number. This being the minimum threshold, and thereafter the succession will continue through the 4 and 7. This is in consensus with the argument developed by Christaller, but Losch continues to the whole series of succeeding arrangements. Christaller only isolated the 3 smallest cases, 3, 4 and 7. But for Losch, the whole series continues as 3, 4, 7, 9, 12, 13, 16, etc. He proceeds to contemplate the 10 smallest areas and tabulates the relation between them, as given in the figures 13 and 14. Thus, the points of maximum demand will emerge as concentration of industry. Every good sold and every service offered will have a different lower and upper limit, a different threshold, and a range of good could be offered at a variety of different points, thereby resulting in a chaos of different meshes designed over the supposed uniform plane. Some order can be introduced by arbitrarily centering all the meshes on one point, which will represent the metropolis. Further, by rotating the various net hexagons above this point, city-rich and city-poor areas can be produced, with maximum degree of coincidence. This is between the city-rich and the city-poor sectors. Losch located the main transport routes given in the figure 15. It is these routes that radiate outward from the metropolis at the center and are termed as Loschian economic landscape. But it must be emphasized that with oversimplification, so that the uniform structure is presupposed with a fixed K, can Christaller's model be derived? The functional array of services fall into distinct groupings in all cases. It is only when a fixed K is assumed that a strict hierarchy in the Christaller sense is attained. It may be noted that under Losch's scheme, a hierarchy, as in that with equal and regular addition of number of subsidiary places served, does not emerge. Rather, a distinctive groupings of the subsidiary places can be found, and hence distinctive ranks identified. The adoption of Losch approach seriously modifies the notion of a clear-cut, unequivocal hierarchy. Even more pertinent, however, is that at least two or other ways of ordering towns in a system have been propounded from an inductive empirical basis, and there appears a marked unconformity between these observances and theoretical models. Losch theory has been criticized for being abstract in nature. It overemphasizes demand. It has failed to take into account problems arising from locational interdependence of plane. It's usually seen that markets often overlap and do not occur in isolation. Therefore, as pointed by Losch location, equilibrium rarely occurs between a unit, entrepreneur and its market. As more firms appear, profits are competed away, and Losch's notion of market demand was too simple. In reality, an entrepreneur will have to deal with several issues before they estimates demand as a basis for their locational decisions. The empirical study might show that no such pattern as that envisaged in the theory. On comparing Christaller and Losch, or the Loschian model, notes that Christaller's theory attempts to realize retail business and services better, whereby Loschian model sought to explain the spatial distribution of market based on the manufacturing. For Christaller, the hierarchy is composed of series of discrete levels. Each center in the same hierarchical level produces exactly the same array of goods. For Losch, the center is present in the same hierarchy may produce completely different combination of goods. Also, Christaller began his hierarchy from the highest centers, such as metropolis, while Losch did the reverse by beginning at the lowest level of hierarchy. Christaller did not take into account the presence of specialized production centers, but was not overlooked by Losch. He considered it. Christaller's pattern is best suited for those cities which developed in sparse settlement region, but that of Losch for densely populated region. Though postulating unreal conditions, oversimplification, and limiting various factors operative on town distribution, the theories nevertheless gives an insight into the nature of the town distribution and of the way in which the national territory is served by towns. It also attempts to search for unified principles rather than describe individual towns. That's all. Hope from this module you would have learned about central place theory as given by Walter Christaller and August Losch. Thank you.